We really look at literacy broadly. Like it's not just reading and writing, so when we think about the opportunity to have something from PBS Kids that is podcasting, that shows kids that stories exist orally or auditorily, and we really give kids like a broader idea that like you can learn in a lot of places, you can hear stories in a lot of places, and it doesn't limit them to things like just a book, right? And like a book is incredible, but like if we can really give them this foundation that shows them that, yes, you have to decide, like, is this going to give you good information, or is this going to be useful of your time, or are you going to hear a story that you like? But you're valuing that tool or that platform to give you something. I think it just gives them more, right? They have more resources. They look to lots of different things for information. Like,
welcome back to another episode of Literacy Launchpad, Read, Learn, Grow. I'm really excited for today's episode because we have a special guest with us today, and her name is
Cara Rager.
Cara Rager, thank you so much, who is going to talk to us about tech apps and literacy. So this episode is really important for parents, caregivers, foster parents, anybody who spends time with kids and you're trying to really learn more about what's out there that you can use to make sure you're using the right type of tools to help support your child, your grandchild, if you're the babysitter, whoever you are, and you're spending time with a kid, how to use these tools and resources to an advantage. So, Cara, thank you so much for joining us and for being a guest. I'm so honored and privileged. I'll give you the opportunity to introduce yourself and share a little bit more about your work and what you do.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. This is so exciting. I feel like a rock star. My name is Cara Rager. I'm the Director of Early Learning for WXXI. And WXXI is the PBS and public media station, where we're actually a joint licensee. So we're PBS and NPR. But we serve the Greater Rochester and Finger Lakes region, which is a lovely area. And I am the Director of Early Learning. And so that means I get to really spend time with educators who are serving young children and parents, caregivers, like you said, anybody, librarians, daycare providers, just any caring adult who cares for young kids. And my job and my team's job is really to bring PBS Kids to life in real spaces and help us think about PBS Kids as a learning tool that may exist on the screen, but also may just exist like in the community, right? So may exist like at your library or in your classroom, and what awesome stuff we can do with this like really trusted, usable resource. So it's so much fun. We joke that like we're called like the PBS Kids ladies because like kids see us all everywhere with like our PBS Kids gear on and like stickers and bookmarks and but there's a lot of thought and like really careful planning that goes into like the work that we do and the work that our team does, which is really incredible.
I love that. I know before we hit the record button, we spent a lot of time talking about the work that you do and what's changed in this really unique time that we're living in and how it's really transformed how you have to really think about what you're creating and what you're putting out there, whether it's in the local level or working with the national level. In this podcast, we always strive to really make sure that we're connecting with the community and being able to provide those resources and tools that are going to help those caregivers and parents and understanding how can they make not just their lives a little bit easier when things just get really weird and challenging, but also how can they really decipher and discern what's the best tools and resources and content. And that's what really at the heart of PBS has done for, decades and decades on end to ensuring that. Can you share with the listeners and the viewers a little bit more about how you're in this unique time really working through this change and transforming what really makes the decisions on how to create unique content? And then how does that transfer into where can parents access and use the app?
It's funny because like in our work in the early learning team's work, everything is guided by families and by educators, like whoever the audience is for the work that we're doing. Like our job, like we would be doing a disservice because it's part of our mission, but our job is really to listen closely to what families need, what kids need, what they're interested in, what teachers are struggling with, what providers wish they could do or are doing that's working really well. And so a lot of the work on the local level, I'm also at the national level, but our team especially, we care really deeply about making sure that what we're doing in engagement or for professional learning experiences or just anything that we're creating at our station, that it's reflective of what the needs of our community might be. And so that means that we ask a lot of questions. We do a lot of listening. One of the things that we've absorbed from a past project with the national PBS Kids folks and our colleagues that were at the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is, our team uses a community assets and needs assessment. And so all of the work that we're doing in early learning is really guided by what are our partners hearing from the families and communities that they're serving? Like, what are we hearing on the ground? What are common threads that we're seeing and hearing throughout? We know transportation is a big issue in our community for families. And so when we design experiences or engagement opportunities, like that has to be kind of top of mind, right? Like, how are families going to get here? Where are we putting this to be located to make it easier for families to get to? Is it in multiple locations? And then anything that we do where families are like, we're able to engage closely, we're asking so many questions, like I said. And so we do a lot of surveys. We ask families a lot of things. And we are so lucky that families care so much about PBS Kids. They care so much about local stations. And they want to see these spaces exist, these resources exist. And so families are very, very willing to say like, hey, like this was so fun. I wish there were more activities, or hey, this was so great. It was a perfect time of the day for us. Like even things that we think are, sometimes we look at data and like, well, we collect from the community and it's not a number, right? But that information is so valuable to making sure that like we are not spending our time doing things that are not helpful, not meaningful, not valuable for a family that's going to come in the winter, bundled up on the bus to our PBS station or to a library. We really want to make sure that it's going to be the best use of their time. And so we have to listen close. Like that's the way that we make sure that we're actually doing our job, that we're actually serving the mission, right? And so sometimes that information comes directly from kids, that simple things like, what's your favorite PBS Kids show? That matters in our world. Like, we're not going to go out in the community and do all these activities or share all these resources or create all these things around a PBS Kids show that we haven't heard is someone's favorite. Like we always hear that Daniel Tiger is someone's favorite. We always hear that the Wild Kratts are someone's favorite. And so we spend a lot of time like promoting new resources, but also really leaning into the things that we hear from kids and families on a regular basis. And some of that's like show-based. So PBS Kids shows are their favorite. And some of it's just, oh, we're really struggling with potty training, or like, wow, there's a lot of big feelings right now. And so when we hear things like that, our early learning team is able to really go, okay, let's dig into the PBS Kids vault. Let's look and see what we have available to us. How can we make sure that we're also helping families that are struggling with a lot of big feelings or routines, like something like, oh my gosh, like how are we getting through our day? Like how do I visually show my kids how to get up in the morning, brush their teeth, get dressed, whatever your day looks like how can we support that too? And I think the really wonderful thing about PBS Kids is it's not just the programs that you watch, right? It's all of the supplemental resources that go with it. And that's one thing that's really cool that like PBS Kids nationally like empower stations to do is like be responsive. So if we find that like a resource doesn't exist, like there is this like co-creation opportunity for stations to go, okay, how do we develop something? Like whether it's branded or not, like how do we work with a partner to make sure we're meeting that need? So it's embedded in everything. And I think it wouldn't be as trusted as it is. PBS Kids and stations wouldn't be if we didn't have that kind of core focus on like serving our audience.
Yeah. And a lot of what you said too, kind of like for me, what I'm hearing is like you really you collect the data to provide the decision making of how you make, whether it's a pivot or a small adjustment to what is being put out there, while also like meeting your listeners, your viewers where they are, and being able to understand what are their needs and being able to say, how do you facilitate more engagement and content creation? And that's such an important of like probably even why you're so successful in doing so, and why it still becomes the caliber of class of like why it's such a trusted resource, not just like a media outlet, but it's a resource for families who are like trying to help discern how do they educate their little ones.
Yeah, it's a big part of when we're doing work, especially with families, but also with educators, like woven in there is this kind of really nice thread of media literacy. I mean, because again, we would be doing a disservice to our mission, which is to educate, empower, engage, if we didn't really think about how are we helping the grown-ups, how are we giving the grown-ups some tools, whether it's how do you get down on the floor and play for a couple minutes? Like, we know you don't have a lot of time, but like, how do we give you some examples of that so that you don't, so that you feel like you don't have to think about it, like it's already done. And also, like, how are we helping you go, like, how do I know which of these games is good? Like, my kid loves playing games, but how do I know it's going to be worth our time? Or how do I know which shows outside of PBS Kids are going to be useful? So we want to make sure that we are leaving families or educators or our adult grown-up audience with some tools so that they're not just kind of in this kind of flooded kids media market, just kind of going, I don't know that one. And we want them to feel empowered to make good decisions.
Yeah. Part at the core of like what we're trying to do as well is like, how do we have these conversations with the experts, the specialists, the researchers that are doing the work and have lived doing the work, and providing them with the opportunity to make the decision on like what has been found so far, what has been studied and researched, and what has actually worked and what hasn't, right? So that they can then, still using their own values and instincts, provide that to how they're helping their little ones. When we talk about educational apps and we talk about websites, we're so used to using Google to like search for everything and navigate what that looks like from the perspective of how we're going to allow Google to be the trusted resource. And when we start to type something into our phones, when we think of tech tools and we think of like what apps and websites, are there things that you would say from the research that's been done, what you know in your work as PBS broadcasting is for kids, what would you recommend, or what do you see kind of being what parents are sharing with you, and what also like is, hey, we've know that this is what we want to make sure parents know about these websites or these tools or these apps?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard, right? I mean, like, I have a 3-year-old. It's definitely a conversation that's like top of my mind. Like, we're not in app land yet, but like even just around like the shows that he's watching, I think it's obviously a work for PBS station. We would love if families start with PBS Kids, but I think the market is so full right now that it is really hard if you didn't grow up on PBS Kids and you maybe heard a lot of conversation recently that like PBS Kids was going away or who knows what. Like, I think it's challenging if it's not on the top of your list to really think about like, where do I begin? And there are really great resources. There are some outside of the PBS bubble, like Common Sense Media is incredible. Like if you're not sure, if you stumble upon something that you're like, oh, is this movie going to be appropriate for my little one? Like this is the time of the year where people take their families to the movies. If you're not sure, there are really wonderful, trusted organizations like Common Sense Media that will rate and review and give you reviews by other grownups who've gone, you know what, this was really good, but you know what, it's really fast, or it was a little too loud, and there was one kind of like part that surprised us too much. Like you'll get some of that feedback from other adults, some of which are the educators who are like, part of the Common Sense Media team, but then others are from the parents who are also reviewing those. And I think even just knowing where to go, right, to kind of double check, that's also really helpful, because it's a scary space to be in. Like you're the one like making the decision. Is this app going to be good? Am I going to spend time on this, or am I going to buy it? I mean, I don't buy any apps, but even in the free land, how do I know this is good? How do I know it's going to be useful for my child? A place like Common Sense Media is really helpful. And I also think having trusted places to start is so valuable. So you were talking earlier about how, things that are researched and have impact and have like learning goals, like that is PBS Kids. And I think like one of the cool things is that PBS Kids is also navigating this kind of children's media technology space. And so it's not just what you watch on your television or what you watch on your device. There are also PBS Kids games. There's also PBS Kids apps. There's also PBS Kids podcasts, and they're all designed for kids and families, whether it's kids playing solo or kids playing with a grown-up or kids listening. They're designed as a place to start. And the really exciting thing, I think, for families, grown-ups, caregivers that have young children in their lives is that just like your kids aren't going to love every show that they watch, or you don't love every movie that you watch, you get to pick and choose based on the PBS Kids games, but there's no commercials. It's not violent. It's helping your kids problem solve or be curious or ask questions or learn their letters. It has a learning focus. And so even if that's not necessarily a priority for you, the benefits, which is what the research tells us, is that your kids are going to absorb some of that good learning that's baked in. And so then when they are watching other shows, or when they are out in the world, or they're reading books, or they're playing with their friends, some of those skills that they're absorbing from either the games or the podcasts or the shows that sticks with them, their tools in their tool bag. And I think that having some key places to start with is really like important, whether it's checking where to find your apps or just like a bubble. Like PBS Kids is a big bubble for that. And I think families appreciate like that there's a space that they can dip their toe into and start to feel comfortable with making those decisions that's safe. And then they can kind of branch out.
Yeah. There's so many great golden nuggets there that I hear come out. And I think from the perspective of like, it's just all about what do you want to decide that you're going to trust?
Yeah.
And also, where is the data coming from? What has research shown? Right? I think those are the key things that are really the secret ingredients to like the recipe. But at the same time, it really comes down to where's the access to that? When we think about what are tools, and you mentioned Common Sense Media, PBS Kids apps, there's games, there's podcasts, they're designed for the beginners. But what are some of the websites or apps that really have been part of the research that PBS potentially has done to say, hey, we've looked at all these different tools. How does it measure to what we were creating as the standard? And what has that done to determine where audiences are going or help understand how you can re-engage certain markets or audiences that really have shifted from being on PBS to something else?
I love that. That's such a good question. So one, pbskids.org is like the gold space. That's the space where you can like access everything in like PBS Kids world, right?
There's the mecca.
Yeah, you can find kids already like, I'm like, oh, do you play PBS Kids? They're like, I already play it. I know how to get to pbskids.org. It's so cute. But it has video, it has games. It's a space like if you use a computer like device, that's a great space to start with. If you use apps, PBS Kids has a video app and they have a games app. The best part about PBS Kids, which I don't know how I didn't say this already, is that like it's free, right? I mean, so many times when you have little kids, things cost so much to like get the best version of something. And this is an opposite situation. Like PBS Kids is the best. It's the best in kids media. It's the best in kids educational media content. And the apps, the PBS Kids video app is free. The PBS Kids games app is free. Hundreds of games that you would find just on pbskids.org too. But the other piece of that is really interesting. Podcasts are like this are really big, like for adults. There hadn't been a lot of research around podcasts for kids or podcasts for families and kind of like, what's the impact of a podcast designed for a family? Like, are they going to listen to it? Are they going to listen to it together? Are they going to listen to it solo? Is it just going to be for kids? So a couple of years ago, PBS Kids put some money from their Ready to Learn initiative aside to do some podcast testing for families. So they created a whole bunch of PBS Kids podcasts, which are also free. Some of them are like a PBS Kids show. And so it adds to the world of, let's say, Arthur. Arthur has a podcast, or Molly of Denali has a podcast. And those, they just add to the PBS Kids story that's being told about Molly and her family, or Arthur and his family. And it's really cool because in addition to that, they didn't just make the podcast. They did the research to go with it, right? Because they observed that there wasn't a lot of data. Like, what's the impact? Are we going to spend our time and our money making more of these? Well, only if it's really going to have an impact for families. Are families going to listen? Is there going to be positive takeaways, like for the adults, for the kids, for both? Who knows? And so early findings came out that were saying like families were listening together, which is so exciting. You know,
that's awesome.
The magic really, you know, in all of these things, whether it's watching, you know, on your television or using a device or playing games, the magic with little kids is like when adults get the opportunity to have time with kids together, that like co-playing, co-listening, that is like the secret sauce. Like that's where we always talk about, like, that's where like the meaning is just stacked so high that like all of a sudden your kids are like, oh, you know that Daniel was jumping in a puddle. So when I reference it later, you're not going to be like, what? You just get it. And I think the cool part is like with the research, like we get more information that it is worthwhile. Like that families get to listen to audio stories, right? Like it is a medium that like we hadn't
touched on. Yeah.
Yeah. And yet, you know, like think about like if you have little kids like in your life, they're all listening to Tony's or like whatever the other, you know, audio story box is. Like this idea that like audio stories can be part of this whole early literacy space, and PBS Kids can be part of that too. That one of my nephews is 9 and he loves Arthur so much. Like they stopped making Arthur episodes, but he was like really bummed about it because he's like, I think I've watched every Arthur episode. And I said, hey, like, did you know that there's an Arthur podcast? And like the glimmer in his eyes, like his heart, you could just tell he was like so excited
The
for
joy, the
new. Yeah.
just like, what? I get to go
Yes.
listen to it now?
And even adults, like we run into grown-ups who are like, I just remember like I would watch Arthur for so long after it was like for me because it made me feel so safe and warm and cozy, like when I would eat breakfast. And so like you'll say, like, hey, did you know there's an Arthur podcast? And they're like, really? I should listen to that. And you can just tell it's this like nostalgic, warm, like cozy feeling that people get because they remember how it makes them feel.
Yeah.
And they know it's a safe place too. And so I think that's exciting for families like looking for things to try because it's safe.
Yeah. I look at things of like, okay, how do people learn? And what are the learning modalities in which we can engage people to understand what works for them? And one of the things that I think is a miss in our educational world is that we oftentimes don't give individuals the space to discern what is their learning modality that's preferred. We impose on a structure that it's given by a curriculum and is designed to how it needs to be versus the individual and how they adapt to it. I very late in my life realized that I was so much more of an audio learner along with the visual learner. But I lost so much of that until I was an adult. How transformative is it now that like we've got this unique time in our world where podcast, whether you're watching it because people can watch this conversation on YouTube, but for kids to like immerse themselves in the art of a story
I love
and
it.
your family sitting there with you and then you can talk about it.
It's
That
so
is a
good.
game changer to then let that little person see and identify how they connect with the story, how they connect with the character, how they connect with how it made them feel, the emotion. It's the one thing to have joy to say, I can go watch my favorite cartoon or my favorite character that was on the television, but now I can listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
It could soothe them to sleep, right? It could soothe
Totally.
them while they're on a road trip. It could soothe them while they're on an airplane
Mm-hmm.
or, you know, whatever that might be. It's such a game changer. And I love that the efforts of researching the concepts and just the continued development. Like, how do you pivot? We were having this conversation earlier. How do we stay relevant to what is our next thing is so critical and key there.
Yeah. And I think it's like from a literacy standpoint too, right? I mean, like, yes, we care about all of those things because they're great, but like from a station, from our early learning team's perspective, like we really look at literacy broadly. Like it's not just reading and writing, you know? So when we think about the opportunity to have something from PBS Kids that is podcasting that shows kids that stories exist orally or auditorily and we really give kids like a broader idea that like you can learn in a lot of places. You can hear stories in a lot of places. And it doesn't limit them to things like just a book, right? And like a book is incredible, but like if we can really give them this foundation that shows them that, you know, yes, you have to decide like, is this going to give you good information or is this going to be useful of your time? Or are you going to hear a story that you like? But you're valuing that tool or that platform to give you something. I think it just gives them more, right? They have more resources. They look to lots of different things for information, like all of the stuff that we hope that grownups have, right? So like, and we know we don't all have that, but like, I think it really, like I said before, like we're here for the kids. Like PBS Kids is here for kids. Like that's that's the main audience for us.
That's what you do. Yeah.
But we're also here for the grownups. And I think like when we really can model for grownups, like what it looks like, how it looks different than when you were a kid, right? But at the same time, kind of the same because my son got this little like story projector thing for Christmas. And all I could think about was like the books on tape with the chimes that told you to turn the page. And I was like, man, it does feel like a boomerang a little bit. Like it's packaged differently, but it's the same concept of like hearing stories and seeing the stories differently. And the more we give kids and families an opportunity to really look at like where they get information or where they get entertainment that engages and teaches them, I think that they just have more tools. And that's really the end game is that like you can make good decisions based on like really good information.
I think that's a good segue for like our last question is like, you know, when you think of the high quality tools and the resources, but are there anything that you would say that You just talked about like how you got this really cool thing for your kid, but
Yeah.
like, what are some technology tools that can be supplemented from traditional literacy activities? It's such a hard question to answer, but I think that like when you think of all the things that PBS provides, but also when you think outside the box of like what is already out there, is anything that really stands out to you that's been like the most effective that you think from the research that PBS has done that is like this really sticks?
Hmm. I mean, I have a couple for sure. I think that it's not necessarily like a separate product or anything, but like I really think the value that PBS Kids games bring to kids.
Mm,
There are a lot of kids that don't watch PBS Kids. Like their only opportunity to engage is maybe playing at the library or playing at school, like on their devices. There's something really, really important about kids being able to either see themselves or see their community reflected, or a story about them that's similar to them. One of the new PBS Kids games is called Lila and Stu's Hairdos. It goes along with Lila and the Loop, is a beautiful series that came out. But it's really important because it's a chance for kids to do hair. And I think there are so many kids in the world that have never seen a game, one, with a little girl that has hair like them, and two, like
mm.
putting value on just those sweet moments at home with your family members, like taking the time to like take care of your hair, take care of your body. And yes, of course it's silly because it's PBS Kids, but there's a realness to it that I think validates who kids are, who families are, something that's a huge part of your day or week.
That sense
Um,
of belonging and seeing yourself in a space that hasn't always been inclusive to creating that is unique, and being able
mhm.
to find that. That I think is really what you're kind of getting at.
Yeah. And you could blow past it like when you're scrolling through the games, but I think watching kids play it and hearing them talk about the game and what it meant, just the comments that kids have said in passing, like when the game first came out, I think it's just really powerful. And I think that it just goes to show that that's one game in the catalog of available free PBS Kids games that can have such an impact, right? And they're
Mm.
silly and they're packaged like in animation. And like, I think all of that just like sometimes gets discounted. Like it's not going to be this powerful thing, but, really listening and taking a step back and watching that, like someone spent money and took time and created this piece, right? This to engage young children. That's amazing. Like that's so incredible that someone found that there was a missing something in this whole bubble, and that kids are now playing games where they get to like see themselves, see their family reflected is what PBS Kids is all about.
I love that.
So that one for sure. But then the only other one I was going to say, it's not in PBS Kids land, is an app called Seek by iNaturalist. And it's like a digital scavenger hunt. It's so awesome. And it's like real nature. And we always think about, again, like tools that support grownups. If you're not an outdoorsy person, if you don't go hiking, if you don't know what to touch or not to touch on a trail, it's scary. And like trying to encourage families to go outside or spend time with their kids in nature spaces is tricky. It's packed with a lot of stuff. So when I stumble upon things that are like really helpful, I think it's really exciting. And so iNaturalist created this app Seek. It's so simple and it's visual based, and it just gives you like geolocate, like so you're not looking for things that are not in, if you live in Florida or if you live in New York, you're not looking for weird stuff that you're never going to find. But I think it really helps empower the grownups to go like, oh, we do want to go on a walk. What are we going to look for? Because scavenger hunts do that in general. And I think there's some really good stuff out there. It's just kind of like finding it sometimes is the tricky part. But like I said before, like starting with where you feel safe and what you feel like that you trust. Like so PBS Kids hopefully is that space for our listeners or for like the community. And so it's a good stop. It's a good start space.
And always using commonsense.org to help decipher what are the
Yes.
things that really help you determine, what would you want to use? And if something really strikes you as exciting because you heard it in passing, then use, commonsense.org to help you decide if that's the best tool.
Yeah.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for sharing all of these amazing golden nuggets and sharing a little bit about your work and, how PBS is really changing and transforming and continuing to do what they do at its core. If listeners wanted to connect with you or find you or ask questions, how can they find you or how can they connect with you?
Well, yeah. So I would say the best place is our station has a Facebook and an Instagram called it's WXXI Kids. And so you can find us on Instagram and on Facebook. I handle kind of managing some of that. So if you have questions, you're welcome to send us messages or, follow us, please, because we share a lot of this information on there as well. Our job is to engage families and caregivers and adults who care for kids. And so it's just another space for us to do that.
Awesome. Well, we'll be sure to include that in our show notes for folks to find the links to your pages. But Cara, thank you so much for really the opportunity to connect, but also sharing this amazing wisdom and knowledge with our viewers and listeners. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was awesome.
All right, friends. Well, if this episode brought you any sense of joy, love, or anything that was informational that you think would be useful for others, please be sure to share it. Until the next one, thanks so much.